Okay, so so in terms of the impact that COVID-19 is having on those whose primary giving or receiving love language is physical touch, I've got 4 points that I really want to make here, especially for those of you whose primary love language is physical touch. So important for everybody to know, we have five senses in our bodies. You know, we see, we hear, we smell, we taste. But the biggest of all of those senses is physical touch. And that's because we have more receptors across our body and over the span of our body than we do receivers of any of the other senses. Okay, so we have a huge potential to feel really loved by touch, simply because there are receptors all over our bodies. Okay, I mean, we know that even, for example, if we have a pet, when we, you know, touch or stroke our pet's head or behind the ears, you know, they're concentrated areas, but the impact of that is, it can be quite huge. And same with human beings, you know, just even the smallest touch in the right place at the right time can absolutely do wonders for somebody's love tank. Yeah. Second point on this is the correct use of physical touch. So physical touch can actually make or break a relationship. And that is to do with the freedom of the gift of the touch. So when we are expressing it as a form of love for somebody else, firstly, we need to be giving that freely. So we're not forced and we're not coerced into doing that to somebody else. But likewise, the person who's receiving that love, it can't be really forced on them neither. You know, they have to be free to receive it. They have to want to receive it, or at least be available to receive it. You know, if they're not, and we try to force it on somebody, we essentially step over their boundary. Yeah. So, and there are different degrees in terms of how much that can happen on somebody else. So, in terms of giving and receiving physical touch, this freedom is critical and really important. And if we think about the situation that we're in at the moment, which is lockdown, essentially we have a government that's enforcing legislation and guidelines that are essentially restricting our capacity, essentially, to express love in a physical form and to receive it. So to a certain degree, this has been taken out of our control. The freedom to be able to express or to receive it has kind of been taken out of our control for the time being whilst we are in lockdown. So this is going to be a challenge for those people whose primary giving or receiving love language is physical touch. Another point is that in times of crisis, what do we do as human beings? We cry on each other's shoulder, we hug each other. You know, this is a fundamental expression of our humanity and solidarity with each other, is to actually touch each other. And we are in a crisis at the moment and we're unable to do that. So, you know, unless we're in a privileged position to be living with others who can receive or give us physical touch as an expression of love, then we might be in a place where we're feeling a little bit deprived and unloved. So, you know, during these times of crisis, the challenge is really very real for those people whose primary love language is physical touch. And lastly, on that and the impact that COVID-19 is having on those people who I'm going to call physical touchers right now, okay, because it's just easier to say. The purpose of physical touch is to affirm your love for another person, and likewise for another person to affirm their love for you. Yeah. So whilst we've been in lockdown, we've been stripped of this to a certain extent. So let's look at the people who are in hospital, you know, suffering from COVID-19. You know, they're in desperate need of love, even if they're not conscious, or even asking for it. You know, it's a fundamental human need to be loved, to love and to be loved. Actually, I love that line in Moulin Rouge, the movie, you know, where they really make a good point of that. You know, that we're here to love and be loved in return. Yeah. So those who are suffering from COVID-19, they need love, and the only touch that they can receive is that from the paramedics, the nurses, and the doctors, who would probably love to express their platonic love for their patients through touch, but don't have the time to do that, or have to separate the emotional communication of love from the professional act of serving and healing. You know, so in other words, there is a separation happening between the emotional communication and the actual act of the touch itself. And this leads to all sorts of problems. And this is where, for example, use and abuse happens if we're taking it outside of that context and putting it in a relationship. You know, physical abuse is exactly that. You know, it's that separation of the authentic communication of love with the actual act of the touch itself. And obviously, if the touch is a negative one and leads to hurt, it leads to abuse, and it is abuse. So in terms of this purpose of physical touch, we are experiencing at this time really a deprivation of love, because even in hospitals, because they don't have the time, or because they have to keep professional boundaries there, that kind of expression of love through the healing touch, through comfort, through consolation, even by the medics and the people who we are calling our heroes, who are our heroes, you know, that is being stripped of its warmth and its tenderness, its color, and the degree of selflessness. You know, the act of selflessness really comes as part of the motive of that physical touch, the communication of touch. So that's a little bit there about the impact of COVID-19 and physical distancing.